All right. Hi, Solomon. And hello,
Hey,
everyone
Simon.
joining. Good to see you. We are here for the first Welcome Change of 2023. So Welcome Change is Ashoka's weekly conversation with leading social entrepreneurs from around the world and from across the Ashoka's global network. We ask folks like you, Solomon, what's next? What are you working on? What are you excited about? And I'm really eager to hear all of those answers today. We have a group of folks who are joining live and the opportunity for them to ask us some questions. So if you're one of those folks joining, welcome. Welcome to folks in the Ashoka community, the Fundibots fan club and community, and anyone who may have found this link online. Please do use that, what is it called? Q&A feature on the bottom. If during the course of the next 30 minutes, you have a question you'd like to hear Solomon respond to. Otherwise, just sit tight, hang in, and enjoy. Solomon, it's really great to be reconnected. I got to know you about 8 years back when you were getting to know Ashoka. How have you
Yes,
been?
I've been good. It's been a really interesting journey. I think when I was starting, when I joined Ashoka, my organization, Fundibots, was really young, probably not even fully registered yet. But it's just been one really incredible journey, one really complex journey, but one that I'm really proud to be a part of and to have led. So thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's good to see you again. So yeah, so we'll hear all about Fundibots. We could start this conversation in so many different places, but you work with young people. How are the kids doing? Right, we just come out of COVID. It's a new year. Where are they in their school calendar? And maybe where in the world are you joining us from? So just introduce us a little bit to the young people who we're going to be hearing about through the course of the conversation.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks. So I'm calling out of Uganda. We are based in Uganda, Kampala specifically, although we do have offices across the country. If you had asked me how the young people were last year, I would have given you a completely different answer. Because as many people on this call and who might be listening might be aware, Uganda had the longest COVID lockdown in the world for schools. And so we had students who were basically sitting at home for 2 years, 2 entire years, without any sense of direction for education. And last year was completely chaotic. As schools reopened, numbers doubled in some schools. There was a bit of backlog. Schools, parents, and teachers were trying to figure out what the transition looks like for those who are supposed to have moved ahead several classes, for those who should be joining. So it was really complex. But I think that we have settled down a little. The big issues that I see when it comes to this sort of 2 years of uncertainty is that it's compounded things in multiple ways. The first is that there has been a significant setback in education. Some analysts actually say that the 2 years of missed COVID education could actually set back the entire country about 10 years in terms of its education systems. So there is quite a lot of catching up to do. But the bigger issue for me is that there's the equity divide, the divide that was already significant before COVID, has been amplified even more. And so when you look at kids that were, in urban schools and in some private international schools that continued learning during the pandemic, online, remote, and all those things, and those who could afford to get tutors for their kids. So those were moving ahead, and then you have all these kids who are in the villages or in the suburbs, and they literally have nothing to do, and all the government initiatives did not work as expected. So there's a significantly larger divide, and I think that it's going to take us a significant number of years to recover from this, and some children may actually not recover because there's some very damning statistics about kids who basically dropped out of the school system during COVID and are not going to go back.
Wow, Solomon, that's a lot. And actually, I'm just sort of like, wow. We will get to talking about Fundibots and robotics. I wonder, how that lands differently given all of these extra challenges. But also just to situate what you just shared, maybe I should say I'm joining from Kenya. I've spent some time in this part of the world, and I'm on a 3-month visit with my family. The kids and I realized that when my 10-year-old is the age I am now, they're right here, but they should be going that way. When he's now, it'll be 2050. And this is the year that 1 in 4 people on planet Earth will be African. And so to be, to have a connection to this place, to be appreciating this amazing continent and its contributions now, feels like a good role as a parent. But it also just, it's hard to ignore that this is, you've noticed so quickly, this is a very youthful, a very vibrant place. Yeah. And so the kids it's been hard. COVID was particularly difficult, but there's some like standout stats and facts and reasons why working with young people in Africa is of the utmost importance. That's not lost on you, right? So could you speak a little bit to the demographics of African young people, or Uganda maybe?
Yeah, I think I can speak with more authority on Uganda, but generally Africa is a very young population. Specifically for Uganda, the most recent statistics I saw was that 78% of Uganda's population is below age 30, and about 8.5 million of those are between 15 and 30 years old. So we generally have a very young population. And what that translates to is that the challenge that education and youth skills livelihood systems have a significant gap to plug, especially because a lot of the education infrastructure in Uganda and most of Africa is pretty much non-existent, especially when you think about the future that we are heading into, and that's sort of the conversation that we want to have today. And so generally, Africa is a very young population. Africa is a very vibrant and energetic population. There was a statistic a few years ago that was running around saying that Uganda is the most entrepreneurial country in the world. And many of us who are here on the ground understand that that is simply because most people are just trying to survive, right? So you're basically, starting up businesses, whether it's a small kiosk around the corner or a larger supermarket. Everyone is sort of like trying to figure out, how do I make more money in this sort of complex social economic infrastructure that we find ourselves in.
So, okay, so Solomon, let's talk a bit about your work. You've just set the stage though, and you've said, if I caught it, there's an all but non-existent education infrastructure in Uganda. We've lost 2 years of education time, which may have set us back 10 years. And then you come in, and I see the Fundibots logo on the shirt. You say, let's play with robots, right? Let's talk about AI. How do you make the case for your work given these challenges? Just that, right? Like, how do you say this is what we need to focus on, and what is it that we're focusing on? What is Fundibots all about?
Yeah, so that has actually seen a very strong journey. I remember the time when I was joining Ashoka, I was asked the same questions, like, what is the rationale or the ethos for, this whole idea of robotics? And it wasn't just Ashoka asking questions. Every single government interaction that I would have, people would say, robotics has no place in Africa. Let's focus on the core issues. And even some funders that we were trying to get to support our work still had the same mindset. But when you spend your life, like I do, when you spend your life looking at the future of the world, specifically around tech, you sort of begin seeing what the possibilities are, but mostly begin seeing what the problems and the challenges are going to be. So Fundibots' journey was initially about, how do we use an extracurricular approach to improve the quality of science education. Me being the geek that I am, robotics was, front and center to what I was doing at the time. And so I felt like robotics would be a great way to get kids introduced to the idea of science education, engineering, electronics, etc. And it proved to be really exciting, especially because in the early days, it was just me going around different schools, supported by a wonderful lady called Betty, who was, helping chaperone a lot of these school meetings. But then as our work kept evolving, I think there was a point where the rest of the the people that I spoke to began seeing, the challenges, but the potential that was coming up. And that was the fact that Africa's education system, or specifically Uganda's education system, is designed to help students pass an exam so that they can move to the next level. It's not really about who do you become after you finish education, and most importantly, are you competent and qualified for that thing that you want to become, right? I like to consider it like some sort of assembly line, where at one end you have a kid who's raw and fresh from home, and then at the other end there's a kid wielding a certificate that says, oh, I'm a qualified engineer. But what happens in between there does not confirm the skills that they're supposed to have at the end of that journey. And so as we continue doing our work, the ideas that sort of became nascent, where the question, how can we improve the quality of science education in the classroom, outside of the curriculum itself. The robotics was a very strong extracurricular learning point, but now we wanted to do something that was a little bit more intra-curricular. And again, Simon, this is around the question of how do you frame your interventions, and at what stage are those interventions the most applicable. So I like to look at it in terms of a pyramid, and at the very top of that pyramid is the robotics work that we were doing. This is extracurricular. This is basically when kids have time on their hands, or it's outside of what's core to that. It's sort of like a luxury, right? But at the second tier of that pyramid is what's happening in the classroom, and then the bottom of that tier is what happens when they are joining school. So right now, a big focus is on what goes on within the classroom, and that is a program that we have called the Enhanced Science Curriculum, which is designed to bring practical science learning directly for teachers to use in the classroom. So it's being tested in the Ugandan curriculum. This is the second year of testing, and the results are phenomenal. We're really excited by what we're seeing. So that's sort of the evolution of our work, but also the realization that we can't approach a problem from the end. We need to start looking at how to get closer to the middle and then move backwards to the beginning.
Beautiful. And I'm thinking of some other Ashoka Fellows in the global network, folks like Imran Khan in Chicago or Brittany Young in Baltimore. And what they've taught me is that unlocking intrinsic motivation is one of the key things we can do for young people to then give them the agency and the energy to navigate, but like you say, the education system, which is a conveyor belt or whatever the metaphor is, it's going to require some of that young person's own energy and motivation and stamina to get, to make the most of that. So I can just so see clearly how robots, right at the top of that pyramid can do that. Can you just, it's still, robots, I don't even know what I'm picturing, like actual like toys. What are give us a sense of like what in that space of getting kids excited and using their hands, what are young people building, and what are some of the most exciting things that you've seen come out of a Ugandan classroom as part of Fundibot's work?
So we like to say that robotics is a problem looking for is a solution looking for a problem, and I think it's really embodied in sort of how our training manifests. And just to connect to the point that you made about intrinsic motivation, I like to think about it as purpose-driven learning. If there is a reason why I'm learning something and I'm excited about that reason, then it means that I'm more invested in the learning, right? I'll find my way around the problems because I'm like, I need to build that end thing. And so in our case, that reason that we normally give is, hey, check out this cool robot, see how it's walking, see how it's moving, see how it's navigating the world around it. Do you want to build something like this? And for the vast majority of kids, there's always that excitement of, yeah, absolutely, I definitely want to do this. And so then they begin the journey. They've sort of given us the permission to teach them, right? And so, in order to get that robot to move or navigate a space, it needs to be programmed. It needs to, and so you talk about code and ICT. And for a lot of students, many of them have actually never touched a computer before, and that includes some of the teachers that we work with. And so that foundational ICT experience as part of the robotics journey is actually really core. And so, you program it, then you add some electronics and you're learning about electronics engineering. You add some mechanical systems so that it can actually move, you're learning mechanical systems. And then because we like to integrate soft skills, there are things like communication, presentation, teamwork, project management, and all of this is very collaborative. In fact, just recently we had from one of our evaluators who said that they're seeing a very strong distinction in how the kids who are going through Fundibots programs handle their soft skills, right? They're like, this is really exciting. You find that students are actually going out over and above their classroom engagement to become well-rounded students. And so they're asking us, can you do the same for the subjects? Because we're really seeing how amazing this is. So the robot being a destination means that once a student finishes that initial robotics project, they are now invested in some of these other things that they've learned. So they might be interested in coding, they might be interested in electronics, they might be interested in mechanical systems. And so some of the things that we see our students doing or experimenting with are automated systems. The most basic systems like, can I build a traffic light for the roads in my home, sorry. And then you find a kid from this one will always stay in my mind, a kid from the village basically saying, now that I know how this works, I think I can create something that opens the gates so that the goats in the crowd can, go out in the morning, so I don't have to wake up very early, all right? And it's really silly, but for me, it's like, oh, wow, they're actually thinking about an actual solution to a problem that they have. But then as the students grow older, especially with our high school and university students, they begin making health monitoring systems. There's a student who's actually very interested in healthcare for cardiac arrests. You find students building irrigation systems, farming solutions, security solutions, etc. And it's all really exciting. But most of this is really, really helpful if there is a protracted engagement with the student that allows them to sort of like express their creativity for a while. Yeah.
This is beautiful. I can't multitask so well, but if I were tweeting or catch quotes, the thing you said about, if this is a way to get young people to give us permission to teach them. I love that. I think that's such a stunning insight. It also just shows that, the respect and the dignity that you see in young people is so clear and admirable. I don't know, say more about that. I just love hearing you speak to that. So the young people and the stance that Fundibots takes in engaging with them, I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, tell us more about how amazing young Ugandans are, right? And why that perspective is in working with them.
Yeah, the thing that excites me about young Ugandans specifically is that the deeper you go into the local communities, upcountry, as we like to call it here, the more you stray away from the towns and the urban centers and go deeper into the villages, is where you see a lot of creativity and a lot of innovation. They say that necessity is the mother of invention. But a lot of what you see young people working with in the villages are very rudimentary tools, things that they can find around their communities. And most of this is not sophisticated at all. So when you bring something that looks like magic to them, it's almost like you have unlocked a level of creativity that you will not see anywhere else. Because there's a certain numbness that comes with seeing these things around us. You look at a phone, you look at a computer, and you're like, okay, I kind of get how it works, but do I really know how it works? And so there's different levels of curiosity from children you find like in urban areas that watch TV or go on the internet, and then those that are seeing these things for the very first time. And one of the reasons why our robots specifically look very rudimentary, because it's very intentional design from us. It's basically made out of wood, wire, plastic, all sorts of things. And the goal behind that is we don't want to go into a classroom and a student says, I need to go and buy this. We want to go there and they say, that looks like something that I can make, right? And that's why, for a lot of the tools that we make, they're locally fabricated. They have a very rudimentary design, but they allow the students to see what's going on within the machine itself. And it's just really exciting. We have a group of kids that went viral last year because as part of the Fundibots Robotics club within a school in northern Uganda, they made a solar cooker, right? And this is not new. This is something that's been around for a while. But the fact that this is a group of senior one students that are, taking the initiative to do this in a club, talk to their head teacher, talk to their patron, and say, hey, can we do this experiment? I think it's really exciting. And it's really encouraging for me to see that schools are providing an enabling environment for the students, because the story of starting Fundibot was because of a lack of enabling environment within my own secondary school. But I have too many examples of ingenuity and creativity within the African community. We might spend the whole day here.
Sure. I'm thinking of your website, and there's Fundi at school, Fundi at work, Fundi at home, and then Fundi girls. Yeah. Why? And you've discussed some of these pieces. Say why it's important to have Fundi girls.
Oh yeah. So this is actually a very interesting point that I was discussing with someone on our team recently. I've been doing a series of videos on AI, but when I look at the demographics of the audience that's watching these videos, it's overwhelmingly male, right? So you have like 95% male and then 5% female. And that is sort of like an extreme example of what happens in the real world. When we look at our numbers in primary school, the ratio is almost 50-50 because everyone is studying sciences. And so you see a very strong correlation between girls enjoying science and boys enjoying science. But the more it becomes optional, you see a significant diversion in numbers. You see a significant drop-off for girls. And there are a lot of social factors around that. There are a lot of economic factors around that. There are also a lot of biases. And I think a lot of it starts with the biases. In Africa, there's generally a bias that engineering, technology, machines, etc., all those are things for boys. And so if you have grown up with that mentality that, the boys do the machines and the girls stay in the kitchen, then that sort of forms this shell in your mind that this is something that you cannot pursue. And then you get to secondary schools and teachers that are supposed to be encouraging you along the journey are saying, sciences are hard, you can't do math, just leave those things for the boys. You begin creating a lot of insecurities around the competence of girls and the competence of women, right? And so what Fundi Girls is trying to do is basically answer a lot of questions around things like that. But the general goal is, how do we move that equity needle to 50-50 the higher we go within the learning systems? So it's basically everything that Fundibots is doing, but with a lens for equitable focus on bringing more girls, whether it's bringing more science teachers into a training session or going to universities and encouraging more girls to apply for our tech internships, or going to girls' schools and encouraging them to pursue robotics and any of these advanced STEM classes. So it's basically just an additional layer, but a really, really important layer to help us bring more girls into the STEM space.
Brilliant. More girls and more boys, more students overall. Because another thing from your website that I just wanted to draw you out on, your website, from this is a place where you state your goals and your ambitions and purpose to the world. You share there that the goal is 1 million students across Africa by 2030. Yes. So, I mean, that great goal. How, right? How do you envision reaching that many students? And where are you at today? You're in couple hundred schools, 20,000 students? How do we get to 1 million?
Yeah. So the last 8 to 10 years of our history was sort of spent understanding the work that we do, but also laying a foundation for that trajectory that we wanted to take. And so we are beginning to see. So we had a really flat curve between 2014 and 2019. 2020, nothing basically happened in schools. And then 2021 is when we sort of began solidifying our 10-year strategy. And then last year is when we began implementing it. And so we are now at the beginning of that exponential curve. So last year, we trained 10,500 students. The 10 years before that, we trained 11,500 students. So in 1 year, we've basically trained almost the same number of students that we had trained in the last 10 years. And that is simply because, that's simply because now we have more structure, we have more resources, funding, teams, programs, etc. But we also have a really solid idea of how we want to do this. So the primary avenue for our growth is working with teachers directly. For every teacher that we train, for every teacher that we train to become a competent science teacher, we are basically amplifying our impact by about 4x, because every teacher basically reaches about 4,000 to 5,000 students within their career. But every teacher that we work with is an amplifier for the work that we do. And so the Fundi at School program is designed to work primarily within the classroom environment, providing tools for teachers, providing resources that they can use in the classrooms, providing teacher training, whether it's on ICT or in robotics or in better pedagogy for science classes. That's all Fundi at School. And then we have Fundi at Home, which is essentially how do we provide better learning resources for students outside the classroom. So that includes things like our YouTube channel, things like online learning solutions, and then some printed material like comic books, etc. And then Fundi at Work is sort of like closing that gap from that transition from school to work, which is about preparing youth for the future work. So that 1 million target is scattered across, and most of it is designed to be amplified by either online learning, which can scale almost indefinitely, or by training teachers to become agents of change within the classrooms, but with a very solid target for mindset change, academic achievement, etc. So it's a really big goal, but we're pretty confident that we can hit it. Yeah.
Oh, this is great. It was so, I mean, when I first met you, it was a really exciting time. You were getting started, you were getting real traction then. And I feel like, yeah, it's been a while, but another really exciting takeoff moment. So very, very cool.
Yeah.
I'll say I have one more question, but I'll use this quick moment to invite folks who are watching, if they have questions, to type those in now, because then we can get to them next. And so that we can see if this can be really participatory. My last question to you, Solomon, I mean, you have a front row seat to the, we can say, future or the current, STEM leaders, innovators, inventors in Africa. And if you had to bet on a set of innovations or a contribution that this generation, this group is going to make in the world, what would you be, where would you be looking? What would you be betting on?
Ooh, that's a really tough one. It's tough for me because the reason we have Accelerate Science Learning in our mission is because we're basically trying to catch up to where the rest of the world is, and we're also hoping that we can overtake the rest of the world. And so it's tough because there is so much catching up that we need to do as a continent in terms of quality of education, academic excellence, post-academic excellence as well. And so it's really a question of, one, we need to step into things like mechanization, like how do we create better efficient systems to help us produce more, to help us be more efficient within our work. The challenge with that is that we are a very manual economy, and so in doing that we will be transitioning a lot of people outside of the work that they know today. And so the question is, how do we do that transition while also preparing them for the work of tomorrow, right? But I think that automation is something that could really thrive in Africa. There are a lot of innovations that have proven to be very unique to Africa because of how complex the infrastructure is, and mobile money is a very good example. But it's also a very good testament of how you can sort of have resource limited innovation, right? Like, the constraints that you have within your communities. And so a question for me is, like, we don't have a lot of mechanization because our land structures don't allow for vast swaths of land to be, like on flat grounds. So how do we innovate around that? And so that's when you have opportunities for things like robotics. We have a lot of data that is sort of unstructured, that is sort of sentimental etc. And so the best way to be able to process data like that is artificial intelligence, right? Sentiment analysis and things like that. So I really think like the fourth industrial revolution could actually be one of Africa's biggest leapfrogs, but we need to do it from a context-sensitive perspective, right? Like, how does AI work for Africa, as opposed to getting an AI solution and hoping that it will somehow fit within what we have. We need to build it from the ground up because of how complex and nuanced our world is. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. No, so helpful to hear you play that all out, to reflect on that. I know we're officially at time, but I did invite questions, and we do have some. And actually,
Sure.
This one I want to ask builds on this point. So that the complexity, the ethics behind some of these decisions, the technology, automation, people out of work or in work, is at the core of this question. How do you encourage young people to consider the ethics when they design their robots or AI? Do you find that they naturally gravitate to these ethical considerations, or is it something that you need to proactively bring up?
I think that is something that we need to proactively bring up, because the thing with ethics is that if you're looking at ethics in terms of artificial intelligence and all these things, it's sort of like a luxury. It's sort of like you've built a foundation for all the challenges. Sorry, you've built a foundation for this issue that you're seeing, and then because of that, you're beginning to realize that, oh, there is this particular issue, right? And so ethics are sort of like an additional layer after you've realized all the things that could go wrong. But the advantage that we have is that we've seen what's going on in other places. And even though I like things like AI art, I'm very aware of some of the challenges and the issues around infringement, etc. So we haven't yet reached a stage where we are baking in ethics into some of the work that we are doing. We're basically still trying to figure out that foundation, which is how do we get Africa to where the rest of the world is. But I do know that it's something that we are considering, especially when we consider the future of work and how many lives will be impacted by the reduction in the availability of manual labor work specifically, because that's a really, really big concern for us. So I don't have an answer for that because we haven't yet baked it into our learning, but it's something that we are thinking about, and we actively encourage on a sort of informal basis. Yeah.
Beautiful. There's a question, somebody working with an NGO running after-school programs in South Africa asked, essentially excited, a little overwhelmed by everything that you're working on, and asking, how would you start small? How would you recommend somebody just getting the core essence or the principles behind your work, and getting some of that flavor into a school system, if not the full-fledged program you've described?
Yeah, starting small is both really easy and really difficult. I think that as long as you have a laptop and you can teach one child, that's it.
Yeah.
We really underestimate the impact that teaching one person can have. A lot of our current staff members, sorry, not a lot, but some of our current staff members have been with us since the beginning, and these are people that I personally trained. But if you look at how they've gone on to impact the work that we are doing through the robots that they're building, or through the trainings that they're doing, it's literally hundreds of lives, if not thousands. So never underestimate the fact that just one person can be a game changer. And then basically it's about maximizing resources. If you have one laptop, how can you maximize that? If you have two, what? And then the other thing that I really like to encourage people is talk to your communities, talk to your relatives and friends, see who of them is actually interested in investing this. You don't have to start off by getting a big funder, by selling all these big hairy or audacious goals. Just say I want to reach 10 students this month, or 100 students this year, and then build on that. And your work and your impact will start speaking for itself. So just start. I don't know if it can get any simpler than that. Just figure out what would be the most efficient way, the most efficient use of your time, and just start.
Sorry, Solomon, has that ever happened to you before?
Sorry, did I get disconnected? Did someone else get disconnected?
I get disconnected. I don't know what I got disconnected. We all got disconnected, but we're back. It happens, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So you were saying starting small is both hard and also the only thing we can do. So I really appreciated that comment. Yeah, I mean, there's one other question. There's so many questions that from the group that I have, but one quick one I would love to hand over to you would be, what would you do differently if you were going through the Ugandan school system today with all the opportunities that are now available? This was one of our participants asking you for your own take on what you would do differently.
Yeah. I think if I was starting from scratch afresh, I think I would try to go into the mid of the pyramid first, which would be basically how can we support learning directly within the classroom itself. The extracurricular is exciting, but it really took us on a long journey in which many teachers and many schools and many government institutions did not see the reason for what we're doing. But now I'll definitely start with, we can help support the learning within the classrooms themselves. The problem with that is that it's really expensive because you're now looking at factors of scale, right? It gets really expensive. But that is the one thing that I would do, and then sort of like go in the middle and then simultaneously approach the top of the pyramid and the bottom of the pyramid. And just for context, the bottom of this pyramid is primarily literacy and numeracy, because that's sort of the foundation for learning.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Solomon. Really, it's been so fun to connect, to hear about your work. The sun is setting here in East Africa, as you can see, and our internet connection doesn't fully cooperate. So we're going to quit while we're ahead. I will just say, I mean, some of the most excitement I have for AI and for the future and for technology as part of that future is truly, it's coming from you and from just following your updates on, I think, is it Facebook or on Twitter? And I know your Twitter handle have been shared. So I encourage folks here who want a little bit more of this Fundi Bots energy magic, you described it at some point, to follow along. It's really stunning work that you're doing. So say final there.
Just a fair warning for anyone who follows me on Twitter, I am absolutely chaotic. I talk about everything and anything. So
it's true though, because I was like so excited to follow your journey as a painter, and then that stopped, and now it's all about chat AI and text.
If it's any consolation, I'm trying to figure out if I can get a robot to paint for me. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, also the spirit of following along, I want to invite folks to just remember that this is a weekly conversation that Ashoka runs, again, with leading social entrepreneurs from across our network. So if you're excited to meet folks like Solomon, we have more change makers building a better future for us all and giving us a preview of what's ahead in many fields and geographies every Wednesday here at Ashoka. So next week we'll be live with an Ashoka Fellow from Spain, learning about shepherds, and here there are many shepherds globally, and they have deep insights on how to live closely with animals. So you can sign up for that chat. I'm telling you, it's all over the place. It's fascinating. And Solomon, it's been great to connect with you. So thank you Fundi Bots community. Thank you, Ashoka friends and colleagues. It's been really great. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you.